They're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. I am a soul mentor and psychic in New York City. And what we do here at Venus Unplugged is it's all things Venusian. It's about love and beauty and heartache and mythology and fairy tales and it's a way of psyche and eros. What we've been looking at is going over the kind of the first generation of Jungians, the women that were around Jung, and these amazing human beings were the first to really get what Jung was talking about and begin to did their analysis with him and with his wife. And so not a lot of people know about the first generation. I think it's always good to go back and see what happened at the first party. So we are looking at the women's Dionysian initiations at the Villa of Mysteries in Pompeii. And this book is by Linda David. And in Pompeii, the mystery school. All right, so at first, it's the first two scenes. It looks as if it's a bride, and it's been misinterpreted that this kind of state of initiation was about a marriage, but actually, it was a marriage, a preparation for death, which I find so fascinating because it was an initiation for matrons, for women who had already either been married or had their children or whatever. So we, in our modern world, I mean, we'll go on shamanistic weekends and we'll set aside some ritual, but I don't know too many people that prepare for this rite of passage, this sacred drama of death. When I was rereading this, what goes on in these initiation rites, and I realized, we think death is dead, but it's not dead. It has another form of being alive. And one of the ways that I feel this to be true is because I've had a few near-death experiences. And it's quite extraordinary. You're never quite the same. And you also are aware of something that, well, for me, it took me a decade before I even realized what it was about. It was so incomprehensible. Talk about the mystery that keeps giving. And, these states of initiation, I mean, we need the containment. In this it was this Villa of Mysteries. So these were this beautiful room with these paintings, which kind of told the story of what these women initiates were going through. Now, Dionysus is the god of ecstasy, and his beloved is Ariadne, who is the labyrinth. It's ecstasy, but he's also the god of death. The agony and the ecstasy, the transformation, the part of us that gets ripped apart. Now, probably one of the simplest forms, if we want to kind of evoke a chaos in our life. Take everything out of a closet and look at all the stuff you've been hiding. It's like a living dream or sometimes nightmare. The things that we find, the discoveries, the things we've been hiding, long forgotten, but carrying dust nonetheless. So, take everything out of a closet, particularly the closet that you'll never go, you don't want to go near, and see it as a sacred right, because that's part of what these mystery schools were about, was how to relate to a mystery. What is the attitude? If we go in with the bright, sometimes negative animus, in women, that's our part of that know-it-all part of ourselves, where we think we know it all, but we're really just repeating some bullshit that somebody else told us, right? And when a woman gets into that space, I have it on the highest authority. Everybody feels it. Nobody wants to listen to them, and if they do, it's usually because they're just afraid of them, and they're just don't want to deal with the negative animus. It's opinions. Opinions are not truths. Truths have many values. So, if you want to evoke some kind of conscious chaos in your life, just start with that and make believe you're in a mystery school and start to notice what you're feeling and what you have hidden away and what now needs to be brought out to the light, and see it symbolically. And in the end, you'll move from the chaos, which we must have. See, Dionysus is also drama. So when we have drama in our life, if it's of value, we come away with learning something. If it's just psychobabble, it's just sheer chaos. Because Dionysus is the shadow of Apollo. Apollo is the god of the mind, the Apollonian thought, the ivory towers of education, and Dionysus, whose one symbol is ivy. So we have the ivy tower of higher education. But Dionysus wraps around those ivy towers. There's always this kind of chaos. It will destroy in order to be reborn. It's also the symbol of the god of wine and intoxication. So that can be the wine of wisdom, where it's distilled like an alchemy, and it comes out this profound drink or experience, or it could be, losing your mind on alcohol and not coming away with anything. Creates a chaos. So in the schools of initiation, in this particular school villa of mysteries in Pompeii, the women would purposely... Now, at that time, Roman women had equal rights. There were lots of divorces, and there were lots of property rights, and so it was very different than kind of the Middle Ages in Europe. All right, so these women would choose to go through this rite of passage, which I think is kind of brilliant. In our society, it's the rite of passage of going into the eighth house or death, right? Seems to come as a shock to most people. It's like, wow, how'd that happen? Or that's not going to happen. And no, it's going to happen. We spend the first third of our lives thinking about and fantasizing about marriage and union and the dress we're going to wear, but the last and greatest and perhaps most profound of experiences, when we're being transformed into some other level of energy, we don't even think about, or we're so afraid of it, or we believe it's not going to happen, or like it's a surprise party. And yet these women, and in this culture, they went for something else. They saw death as another aspect of that it had life force. It had Dionysian energy, which may be chaotic to the nicely ordered way that we want to perceive life. And truth, instead of, hey, when a truth comes into your life, believe me, it usually comes with chaos. It just flies all over the place. It disrupts us, or we know its presence because we can start feeling like, oh man, do I really need to know this? This is just going to totally disrupt, who we think we are or what we think love is. How many times in the high drama of loving another, we find out something so shocking. They've been exactly who they were all along. We just didn't see it, and then suddenly we're shocked. But it wasn't being hidden. It was there. Just didn't see it. And not to mention what goes on within ourselves. All those marvelous little Dionysian energies we have. And it's like, I can't believe that I did that, or I can't believe that I said that. Yeah, you said it. Now stand for it. Because it will come out in chaos. Sometimes that's why people pick fights. They just want to scream something out, and it can come out in this chaotic form, and at least it's living. So that's one of the things that happens. But here we are in this incredible, and for those who know anything about Pompeii, the color red was like that pomegranate red, very rich, powerful. So it was passion and blood and the ripeness of life, and then giving up to the chaos, giving up to the not knowing. So in the Jungian work, okay, there's usually, always look for the number 4, because things come in 4 stages, and when we look at the ancient rites of people, 4 is the number of the divine feminine. So in initiation rites, there's usually the catharsis. That's when you walk in and you start really realizing what your problem is. And then there's somewhat of an analysis. You start going through a process. What's really going on here, right? And then there's kind of an education where you sense your sense of power, you sense or you adapt, okay? And then there's the transformation. Same thing happens in these different scenes. So we're looking at the third scene, and in the third scene, so these are the paintings on the wall, which are telling us, hinting. Remember, it's a mystery. And mysteries we don't try to open up with the bright light of intellect, because it's going to blow up in our face. And we're also not going to understand. Very often, when we're in the presence of a mystery, we can't even formulate what's really going on. And there are days you'll wake up and you are a mystery to yourself, or the beloved other is an absolute other. Chill. They're in a state of mystery. Don't analyze it yet. Let it cook. Let it stay in that state. So we have, of course, Dionysus and Pan. That's in the ecstatic form, the erotic form, and for those who allow themselves ecstasy, the feeling of this kind of complete, energetic, chaotic force, longing, energy, sexuality. When Dionysus suddenly enters in our life, that can also be the fatal attraction, like you got struck with Dionysus, because you wouldn't honor it. So you're setting yourself up for a fatal attraction. Oh my God, I can't believe this. Yeah, well, believe it. Of course, That's who's in your life now. So the symbol of Silenius, who's this kind of, I guess he's kind of an Orpheus figure. So he's the first one that we see, and he's a companion of Dionysus. That's Silenus. And he was originally a fountain demon from whom wisdom flowed. Therefore, he was a watery spirit. And at the same time, however, he was also a Dionysian wine demon who prophesied in drunkenness. He had the blood of the god in him. The fountain which he embodies is therefore a divine spring. Divine. So like in alchemy, the divine water of alchemy is called the divine spring. So as the fountain of divine water, Celeus was also Dionysus' teacher. Symbolically, he's the embodiment of the holy water that purifies the laurel. They would wear laurel leaves, and laurels are also symbolic of truth. Right? So this water spirit is painted as the sidekick to Dionysus. And it flows, this wisdom flows as it will flow eventually within the initiate. So if we translate this into the symbolism in Hmong language, we can perhaps say it's related to healing, purifying significance of the unconscious that achieves life sufficiencies. Okay, water has always had this meaning of purification. It's the unconscious flowing. So when we have dreams of water, or we're drowning, so we're not in right relationship with the flow of the energy of the unconscious. We get overwhelmed. So when the participants in the mysteries came to this figure of Silvanus on their own initiation, they stand at the border where the collective unconscious opens itself to them. And he's the mediator, and he first puts them in contact with the contents of the collective psyche. So the collective psyche is the ancestors that we all have a piece of. That's what connects all of us together. So he's a very important figure and has multiple meaningful aspects. But they show him, which I think is so, as a mediator. And he's something like a jewel box, which contains so many costly things. So what flows from him through the wisdom which he makes known to the great teacher, so when we have a dream of a jewel box, or we, like I said, open up that jewel box of all that chaos you've got in your closet and start seeing everything that you have in there. So what this symbol, so the women are in this state, they begin to enter slowly into the realization of the collective unconscious, whatever the priestess or priest is guiding them through. I mean, now nobody knows exactly, as in all of these mystery schools, exactly what happened, unless they knew how to keep a mystery. But this is what's being interpreted from the walls, and it's like anything else. It's like a living work of art. You'll go in and you'll interpret it according to the state of consciousness that you were in. A perspectival. The work will speak with you, and you will speak with the work. That's what artists do. So one of the representations, of course, is Dionysus in the nature form. this pure, raw energy. And it also represents the woman, the ancient woman, when it was such an honor to be like just levels and fullness and flesh, and to the ancient mind, that was bounty. It just represents the hills and the dales of the Great Mother, and how she was the giver of life, not just one stick or weed, but fullness and richness. It also represents the diviner, how we can see things in a different way. We interpret. We all have one of those within. And we also, in primitive tribes, we would look for the shaman, which we still do now, thank God. Or, it's the function of the spiritual and the guiding and the teaching one. We have one within us, but usually it doesn't get activated till we meet the teacher, the one in whose eyes we see our own soul. That's how we know it's the right one. So these women would go through these rites. They would meet this aspect of themselves, and at higher levels of consciousness, they'd have to fall, because if they saw, they would be open to the collective unconscious, but then they would have to realize, I don't know anything. In this state, in this moment, I know nothing. Now, for the modern person, that's pretty scary. But if we take a mystical view, and perhaps a loving view, we then need to say, no, the ego is feeling a loss. And loving is a loss to the ego. An initiation is a loss to the ego, because we don't know. And certainly a mystery is a loss to the ego. But we can then say, I'm not going to judge this. I'm in the presence of a mystery. Perhaps I've been teleported to the Villa of Mystery in Pompeii, and let me just work with this. So one of the instruments, of course, one of the instruments of Dionysus is the meads and the wild dancing. So that's why we have raves and we love dancing. And if you want to get in touch with your Dionysian energy in a kind of a safe way, kind of do some ecstatic dancing, and you can feel that God moving through you. Because we become drunk with the eros and the erotic energy. So when these women would go into the state, then they would have to realize, as they got in touch with the collective unconscious, which is also the life path, they'd have to then. And now this is all happening. It's like an awaking dream. It's all happening. I'm sure it took them years to figure out what really took place. Any of you that have attempted, to even just a workshop, we usually come out kind of all ecstatic, and then forget about it, and then little by little, what we did learn, what did make sense to us, shows up. So it's a developmental stage, but it's very costly, because the ego's got to give it up. So we have this kind of essence of Orpheus playing the lyre, which is the musical instrument. And actually, it was Mercury who developed that. Out of the lyre was the first musical instrument. So through sound, we are deeply affected, waves and particles. But that all the creatures of Dionysus and Pan, these are like the goats and the kids and the these very erotic little animals are having a lot of fun. And that's also to have us understand our randy side. And to the light of the Apollonian consciousness, don't be randy, but we need to be. We need to feel all that energy. We need to feel what that is about. So in this third scene, what the woman begins to experience is a deeper level of her younger self, her erotic self, and the sounds and the music of the forest and the realm of the animal kingdom, the sacredness of the animal, and kind of the cosmic harmony, which is pretty powerful stuff. These archaic forms of dance, but they were in a more mild, poetic form. So if we can imagine, these women would be moving into a state of an ecstatic dance, not wild, crazy, nymphy stuff, but just eros. The body knows. The body also knows when its expiration date is, and it aligns. Not a terrible thing. It's terrible because we don't want that. We can't understand that there's and yet another form of life and movement and sound and ecstasy in the cosmos. So the symbol of the mystery for the participants in the Orphic cult, there were like these gold lozenges with inscriptions, which the Orphic gave to their dead devotees to help them on their difficult way through the underworld. And these inscriptions were supposed to awaken the dead to the memory of what they had experienced in the cult, which also guides them through deaths and their proof of identity before the ruler of souls, which is Dionysus. So one of these examples, one small gold plate found in a grave near the ruler of souls, Dionysus, was like a little kid, a little kid that fell in the milk, a little animal. Okay. And this means that the dead should ponder that in life they already accomplished the way of transformation. It's kind of interesting. That just by living life itself is the transformation. Now, we can amp it by studying. We can amp it by going to mystery schools and discovering it, which is what this was about. So the first, in the third scene, we see this. This is how the first union of the participant with Dionysus looks like. And it's a shock. And it indicates that it was like, God, I can't believe it. Now I'm in shock. I've got 90 seconds left. So here, the initiate's like robbed of her tongue. She's speechless. And anytime that we've been speechless, something far greater is happening inside of us. So that was the first change in the mystery cult. We lose our form of consciousness. We go into the sacred and the mystery of the something far greater is happening. It's also the same challenge that happens in the individuation process. Suddenly, we don't know what we think we know. And we go through a stage of chaos. I don't know myself. Who am I? And then with a lot of work and a little luck, you begin to commune with psyche. So for those that wish to study this, the Women's Dionysia Initiation Rites, The Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii, by Linda Ferris David. And if you want to go, as I said, kind of a practical closet, you're going to find a mystery. You're wondering what's going in there. And next week we will continue with the fourth scene, and hopefully your life will be filled with the sacred drama and not the hysterical drama, which gets us nowhere. And the sacred drama of you, of becoming you. We're never quite finished, which is the true work of art, of being human. So, till next week, au revoir.
You're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13. Appropriate for children under 13.